All right. Hello, and welcome to this next session of Advanced Energy Week. We hope you're able to join us for the last session on the future of transportation, which is clearly a timely topic with infrastructure, a hot topic in Congress these days. My name is Julia Piper, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. I'm also the host of Political Climate, a bipartisan podcast on climate and energy issues in America and around the world. I'm also Vice President of Communications and Policy for GoodLeap, which is the nation's leading financier of residential sustainable solutions. And we're also a proud Veterans and Energy Week partner this week. So, as I mentioned, I'll be moderating our session, and I'm pleased to be joined now by Indiana Senator Mike Braun, who is co-chair of the Senate Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. We're going to have a dynamic fireside chat. Hello, Senator. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Great. Well, before we launch in, just a couple of housekeeping remarks from me. This event is on the record, and so we are also live streaming to Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We encourage everyone watching to post about this event, share quotes, or just reshare this with your friends and colleagues. You can also do that with tagging the event, Vets Energy Week, so hashtag Vets Energy Week. You can also tag AC Global Energy to tag the Atlantic Council and Vets_Energy to include the Veterans Advanced Energy Partnership. Also, if you want to participate in this conversation and submit a question, we encourage you to do that through the Q&A portal at the bottom of the screen there. You'll be able to do that by logging in through the actual Veterans and Advanced Energy portal, and that is how you can actually submit questions. So please go ahead and do that. We will be weaving those into the conversation. Okay. That is out of the way. Senator Braun, it's great to be with you. For everyone's awareness, you serve on the Agriculture Committee, the Budget Committee, Appropriations Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Also, as folks may know, he won in 2018. And prior to that, was actually CEO of Meyer Distributing, a company that Senator Braun built in his hometown of Jasper, and he's been really focused on job creation. I know that continues to be a focus for you, Senator, along with national defense and helping our veterans. So thanks again for being here. All right, jumping in, enough from me. We want to hear from you, Senator. I'd like to start with the infrastructure topic. As we know, it's dominating the news right now, and there are major implications for energy, which folks on this call may be interested in. So just to kick us off, could you tell us sort of where the state of play is on that? What items are you watching? What would you like to see? And we'll start from there at a little 10,000 foot level.
So infrastructure to me has been important. My business is distribution and logistics, and we built out a system across the country that was very, very small initially, and now has 70 locations in 40 states. 3 of my 4 kids run the business, but I understand logistics from its most primary basis to doing something nationally. And there couldn't be a topic that's probably got more agreement that we need to rebuild an aging infrastructure. Roads and bridges, let's start there. That's what most people understand when you speak of infrastructure because it's most universally used. Of course, freight passes through inland waterways, rail, air. You now have the idea of rural broadband and that technology that's interwoven. That's probably the differentiator in my own business is embracing technology. So it's important, and then it gets down to the question of how do you address it sustainably here through the federal government. Should we be the primary driver? Should we let the markets do it? Should we let local and state governments do it? And I think the answer is it's going to be a combination of all of them. Sadly, my new employer, the federal government, has probably got the weakest balance sheet relative to where it needs to be a long-term partner on investing to where you're not using the debt markets borrowing to do it. So important, we all agree on it. I've always based my decisions, being a conservationist at heart, being someone that looks at the midterm and the long term more importantly than the present. So much of what you do in the present sets the stage for how easy things are in the midterm and long term.
Well, to follow up on that point, Senator, I know you've spoken about the need to balance investing in the nation's future, but also, sounding the alarm on deficit spending and making sure that we are being fiscally responsible. So, how do you think the nation can balance those two things and actually get the infrastructure upgrades that you mentioned there earlier? Are there programs you can do to encourage more private investing? What would be the mechanisms you would look at to balance those two things?
We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Infrastructure for roads and bridges has traditionally been paid for by the folks that use it. That gets somewhat complicated. To me, user fees are different from general taxes. And many on my side of the aisle are probably in that mode to where they don't want revenues to go up at all. I'm not there because that isn't realistic, but I'm also not interested in borrowing from my kids and grandkids to do these big projects. That doesn't make sense either. We did it in the past, even at the federal government, by charging the folks that use it to pay for the infrastructure mostly. Increasingly, we've gotten away from that to do it out of the general fund, which then makes it easy to borrow the money and not be responsible. Indiana, when we did it in 2017, we ran it through regular order, roads and transportation and ways and means. I was on both of those committees. We got broad buy-in, mostly from the stakeholders, business, that their diesel taxes went up 20 cents, and every one of them said, we're willing to pay more if you use it for roads and bridges. That takes a certain kind of discussion. It takes political will, and we don't do that here now. And we fund 80% of it. The states do roughly 20. So their balance sheets are strong. They actually still pay for it in the fashion that we used to here. We've gotten away from it. I don't know how we turn that ship around.
All right. I'm sure it'll all be sorted out before the recess in August. So we all look for that. No, but looking a little more globally, then we're talking about investments in infrastructure, and these help support American competitiveness. So I wanted to ask you, looking at the energy transition, again, from that global perspective and taking a competitive look at it, how do you think the US can stake its claim to be a leader in the global green economy? Is that tied to infrastructure that's moving right now? Are there other things you're looking at, other policies and ways that we can ensure that the US truly is a leader across all industries related to the energy transition?
So let me cite our largest rival across the world. That'd be China. They're coming from a place similar to like Japan and Europe, rebuilding a lot of their infrastructure that needs repair. Most of it they're building new because they've been that recently kind of a developing and soon, I think, developed country, more so than developing. But they are savers and investors. And we used to be that coming out of World War II. That's how we built the interstate system after paying off the largest debt we ever had prior to currently. So a lot of it depends on what is built into your economy and your culture. They are probably in a better place to kind of dictate what happens globally because they're going to have a strong balance sheet. We're going to be coming from behind. We're going to be that economic entity that used to have the mojo that would lead, that could maybe fairly make the point that if you want to grow in a green way and do it through infrastructure, maybe you ought to be doing some things that are practicing what you preach. Like they still put up a coal-fired plant almost weekly. We've been getting out of electricity generated through burning coal. And we got to be careful that since we now turned into a consumer nation, we're still borrowing a lot of money. We want to lead on it, that we don't put ourselves in even a worse spot and let our main geopolitical rivals get by with having their cake and eating it too, which is what the Chinese are doing. So I think the answer to your question, it remains to be seen who is going to really galvanize their own resources, convince the rest of the world to enter into what I think is now nearly understood. We got a challenge on trying to keep CO2 emissions out of the air. We've been doing it. Europe's been doing it. Japan's been doing it. Australia and Canada. The rest of the world's been going the other way, but also wanting to be in on leading the way to a green economy and green infrastructure. Some contradictions there.
That's interesting. So, where do you look for avenues to make progress? Do you look to the COP26 climate talks as a potential avenue to have these discussions? Are you having bilateral ones? How do you think we unify these talking points here?
I think that's going to be a big discussion in Glasgow. I think we've got to be careful as still the country that holds most of the cards has been setting a good example on what we're doing in terms of we're now not the biggest emitter of CO2. China does that. We still are per capita. India is going to probably exceed us at some point as well. But we need to be real careful that we don't hamstring ourselves as we try to lead and then be the financial principal in doing it, because we're not in the position we were 3 decades ago when we had very little debt on our federal balance sheet. And now we've added almost 10 trillion in just the time I've been here, which is 2.5 years. That will force us into some uncomfortable spots sooner rather than later. So, and I haven't found many other senators that pay much attention to that. Most of them have never run a business like I have and been the CEO and CFO. I did both of those for 37 years. So it's kind of wired into my DNA, I guess.
Sounds like a lot of spreadsheets to me. I guess what I want, just because I'm so interested in this line of thinking, is there a way to close those gaps? You talked about the fiscal issues that the country may be facing. Do you see beyond infrastructure even other ways we can start to, mitigate that spending or offset spending and rebuild
Well,
the books?
if you want probably the most entertaining discussion of that recently, at least that I've been involved in, go to YouTube and look at the Braun Sanders debate on the modern monetary theory, which means that deficits annually don't matter anymore, along with the accumulated debt. And he clearly points out where their thinking is. I would debate him not only on the merits of the case, but that has never worked anywhere else. And just because you've got a few economists that now say that doesn't make any difference, maybe because we're the only reserve currency out there and the printing press is in the basement, so to speak, that we can get by with it. I would not bet the farm that I live on, but I'd say that my scenario is more likely of playing out than Bernie Sanders. But in the moment, you can see that we're on a different mindset, and we'll see how that works. And sadly, all that'll pivot quickly, and it'll be 3, 5, maybe 10 years down the road where we got a lot less flexibility to deal with it than what we would now.
So you mentioned farms and farming. I would actually like to switch to that topic. You come from a state that represents a large farming community. So how do you think that renewable energy and the green economy writ large can benefit that constituency, the farming community? I know we're talking about spending here. I want to be, in your perspective, is to be careful with that. But are there spending policies or other types of policies that would make sure that farmers are part of this national transition to lower carbon energy resources?
So number one on spending, we ought to minimally not spend more than we take in currently. And we were generating record revenues with some of the policies that were put in place, finding that kind of sweet spot of taxation where you have lower rates, but the people most able to pay taxes were paying it. You were raising wages and so forth. In farming, which is only 10% of US CO2 emissions. By the way, it's 25% across the rest of the world where the economies aren't as developed. And here in the US, it's 10 to 12%, and then the balance is split among industrial emitters, transportation, and electric generation, those three. Farming is probably the easiest place to do it, to where we can have the most impact. Because if we're only emitting 10% of our emissions, that means a lot of what we do here already puts farming in the category of being at least closer to net zero in terms of our footprint. And we got a lot of different ways I think we can do it practically through methods, through encouraging reforestation across the world, being better managers even than what we are, but get those techniques to rub off. And yes, you do need to invest money to make or save money. And agriculture, I think, is a good place to do it because we're already doing a pretty good job. And if we could just get the rest of the world to do it, that'd probably be the lowest hanging fruit that we could get in the immediately. And because of this reason, several CEOs have been in my office and have said that they don't know how they're going to go beyond picking the low hanging fruit. And that means 10 years out to get to their 2050 goals of net zero emissions. They said the rest of it's going to have to come through technological breakthroughs or something we're working on. Agriculture probably has more birds in the hand than being in the bush in terms of things that we can do.
Great. I'm just looking at some questions coming in, and one came in that I think is related here, so I'll turn to it. They'd asked for a long-term strategy on economic stability to feed the world. Since we're talking about farming, how do you think about food in relation to that?
Well, I think that is an issue that has many variables in addition to climate. If we're dealing with farming as I can see it now, high risk enterprise, we're still the breadbasket of the world. Good news is a lot of other countries are putting farming up there as something they want to be more self-sufficient at. And I think that's okay because with population growth, it's going to become an increasing challenge along with all the variability that climate throws in there. So basic nutrition that eliminates being undernourished, let alone starvation, should be the number one goal as a world that we aspire to accomplish. And a lot of it's interrelated to not only population growth rates, the variability, like I said, that climate throws in, and to use the techniques here in this country across the rest of the world.
So we mentioned earlier that you're co-chair of the Senate Climate Solutions Caucus. I know you've done some other events recently on this with Senator Coons, I believe. So stemming from those discussions, we'd love to know how things are evolving. What are the bipartisan solutions that you think could pass in this Congress or in years to come? What's getting the most traction right now?
So the good news is, in a short period of time, we had the first climate bill pass out of the Senate. I co-authored it along with the chair of the Ag Committee, Debbie Stabenow, Growing Climate Solutions Act. It went quickly because it didn't require any more federal spending. We'd have been borrowing that to do it. It matched up voluntary markets with good stewardship. Only 3 Republicans voted against it. I would have probably bet the farm a year ago that would never happen. Only 5 Democrats voted against it, 92-8. That was a modern miracle when it comes to kind of how polarized this place is. So there is bipartisanship, but I was the first Republican after Chris Coons tried for 2 years to get it started. I was a conservationist. Am here for probably a different set of reasons than most are. I come from the entrepreneurial world of making decisions somewhat more quickly than the deliberative body would. Said yes. He said, well, you get one more Republican, meaning that he tried, are you going to be successful? It took me a month and I got 6 others. And we've been involved in conversations through the Senate Climate Caucus with probably 20 to 25 different groups, even through COVID. And the thing I can tell you is it's gone from CEOs, the industries involved, being interested, but not knowing how interested they want to be, to where now they all want to be in the game. And I always compare it to healthcare, where I've been the loudest, most outspoken, because I've wrestled with that as a business owner that's not part of the healthcare industry. They drag their feet and fight you every step of the way. energy, transportation, even throw in finance and tech. All of them want to solve the issue of climate and be a part of it. And even to the point where it would have been, everybody would have cleared the room if you had mentioned carbon pricing or taxing. Many of them would like to see that if it was in lieu of regulation or maybe a combination of the two. That wouldn't have been even an item of discussion 2 years ago. We've made great progress, got a bill through the Senate, and I think it'll pass through the House here before the end of the year.
And just to confirm, the bill you're referring to, that is agriculture related, is that right? Climate and agriculture?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Growing Climate Solutions Act, which simply was an idea that I knew I'd get my side on board. Don't spend any more money that we don't have. Find ways to pick that low hanging fruit to get the conversation going. And I'm, as a conservative and Republican, believe if we're the party of no or I'm not interested, we're going to get blindsided with legislation we probably don't like. So we ought to be out there with good ideas as an alternative to more government that we can't pay for.
That leads into my next question, actually. In June, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy announced the creation of a climate change task force charged with devising a policy agenda to address global warming should Republicans capture the House again in 2022 midterm elections. So I wanted to get your perspective on this. Does this, in your mind, signal a shift in thinking on the Republican Party? You talked about how the dialogue has evolved even in the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on that move by my House Minority Leader, Senator McCarthy, and what that means?
So they had a bipartisan climate caucus that I think was there, but it was at the time where it was mostly lip service on our side of the aisle. A guy like me comes along, and I'm not saying I started a cascade. I'm just saying something happened, and we got stuff going here, and they've seen that. They saw what happened uh, when they had companion legislation that didn't get the traction that we did here, make it through 92-8. And I think that's smart what Kevin's doing. And I think the task force, and if that's the same thing that I talked to several other House Republican reps about, they're up to 70 that have their own task force or climate caucus that is new, and it's above and beyond the bipartisan group they had there because they want to fashion Republican conservative ideas that are going to be workable to sell across the aisle.
It's exciting times that we get into the solution discussion, I think, and people are excited to see, the real policies come up and be debated rather than, whether or not to do anything at all. I think that's an exciting evolution of these discussions and hopefully creates a lot of opportunities for new jobs and things like that, which is, I think, relevant to this audience. So, we have people who are veterans who are looking to maybe work in the advanced energy sector. Given what you know of this space and all your work, do you have any advice for them? Any industries you think are particularly exciting today, or other ways that you would direct this audience on the career front in clean energy?
Well, I think when it comes to a veteran or anyone else that is looking to find a good job that's going to pay more, going to be in demand more so, um, it's going to be in this arena. It's just a question if it is orchestrated through the government and not through a more grassroots effort, which I think is going to happen because the CEOs of most of these big companies are interested in being part of the future. And then it depends on how much kind of government gets in the way, is kind of a coalescer of where we're going. It'll be interesting to see. Many are so passionate about the issue that I think they probably want to ask more from government than it can actually deliver. And I'm going to be one that is going to try to take a balanced point of view and especially bring to my side of the aisle some of the leaders of my caucus of the party that need to learn more about where the marketplace is among many of the people that support us on other things in terms of where they'd like to go. And that would be that kind of uncomfortable conversation on maybe looking at some type of pricing mechanism versus or in lieu of less regulation.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to avoid the policy discussion. So, do you think there's an opportunity for carbon pricing of some kind? What does that look like? It seems like the conversation has evolved more to standards or regulations, as you say. A clean energy standard is being discussed and advanced in Congress now. How do you think about, maybe two-part question, is carbon pricing viable and have a shot at advancing in the near term? And then, since I mentioned it, the clean energy standard, do you see that having legs?
So I think on carbon pricing or taxation, along with a border adjustment tax that I think you'd have to have if you're going to do something that prices it in your own country. Again, that would probably be mostly aimed at places like China and India that not are kind of gaming the system a little bit. I think that is possible, and it's mostly because I can see how that discussion has traveled when it comes to the 2 years I've been involved in the discussion. When it comes to some type of sustainable energy policy, uh, I'm real confident that that's going to happen because all the players out there are going to probably be maybe along with government, if not ahead of it, in terms of how they're redeploying their capital into a greener way of producing energy. And it will be the cleanest, least expensive. And that's what some of the CEOs said they think is still yet to be determined, and that they'll need to have to get their goals met beyond the easy stuff they're doing currently. And I said, well, what's the likelihood of that coming to fruition? And they said they wouldn't be out publicly committing to a net footprint in 2050 if they didn't think there were enough items in the incubator along the lines of advanced nuclear technology, hydrogen fuel cells, and just a bunch of other stuff that is, I think, going to happen. And that's encouraging. And I believe then energy will be maybe be something you have to legislate less on than other things here, because that's how much movement I've seen across a broad array of stakeholders.
Yeah, we're speaking, I think just in the last recent few days, Brookfield and TPG, massive financial industry players, each put 7 and 5 billion each into clean energy, ESG related funds. We're seeing the financial markets align on this. To your point, the corporations themselves are also setting their own targets. It's an exciting time. The dialogue is shifting. I guess just to close this out here, Senator, I'd love to just get your thought when you look to your crystal ball. What would you like the energy transition to look like for America in, say, 10 years, by 2030 or 2035? These are years we often look to meet big climate goals. What is your view of where we should be at in terms of decarbonizing and maybe what our energy mix looks like?
So we've talked about the four sectors of agriculture, industrial emitters, transportation, and electric generation. You've had two of the biggest there. Most Detroit manufacturers they've been too ambitious. I don't think we haven't talked about the grid and transmission and what going to EVs would entail. If that would happen by 2030, that would be a modern miracle along the lines of how quickly we did a vaccine. Uh, I think it'll take a little longer than that, but they're out there publicly saying it. I don't know of any utilities that intend to burn coal unless you'd have a magic occurrence of being able to capture carbon uh, and kind of sequestering it. So I think that just if you extrapolate the distance that we've moved in the time frame, that I'm optimistic about it. And I think that for us, we got to be careful. The only thing that would constrain the United States from being at the forefront is the red ink of how we have gotten used to living as a federal government, because so many people come here, want our guidance, want our leadership, want funding to help. Uh, we may not need it if the industry is so focused on solving this themselves. But generally, the energy industry, like many other important parts of our economy, are intertwined with the federal government. And it would be nice to have us healthy with accommodating regulations and a balance sheet that could even weigh in a little bit along the way to help the process, not hamper it.
Great. Well, Senator Braun, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you also to everyone who joined us for this important and productive conversation on the future of energy and climate policy in America. We hope you enjoyed the Veterans Advanced Energy Week sessions, and we hope that you'll stick around for the next one happening here at 4 p.m. Eastern. There's a superstar lineup of speakers going to discuss the role of nuclear energy in achieving net zero goals. Also, if you want to rewatch this event or share it with a colleague, you can look at a cache replay that'll be available on the Atlantic Council's YouTube channel and all of their social media platforms. That is all from me. I'm Julia Piper, your moderator. Thanks everyone again, and see you at the next event.
Thanks, Julia.